So, what if Bitcoin, the way we know it right now, actually has a built-in expiration date? Today, we're going to dive into this really fascinating academic paper that looks way, way beyond the next halving cycle. We're talking about Bitcoin's next 13,000 years. And yeah, it proposes a pretty radical reinvention to make sure it actually survives that long. And right off the bat, the paper asks this super provocative question. We talk all the time about Bitcoin's security, its hard-capped supply, but is it really designed to last forever? I mean, like, forever, forever? The author's take is pretty stark. Without a fundamental change, the answer is a hard no. And the reason why? Well, it's probably not what you're thinking. We're not talking about quantum computers cracking the code or some government finally shutting it down. Nope. The paper points to something much more fundamental, something deeply, well, human. A problem that could literally bring the whole network to a grinding halt. All right, so what is this big existential threat? The paper calls it a demographic vulnerability. And that's a key phrase, because this isn't an issue with the software, it's an issue coded into the very nature of human life itself. And there it is. It's the simplest, most unavoidable truth of all. People die, and their private keys get lost forever. I mean, think about it. It's not like a bank account or a house. If the knowledge of that private key is lost, say the owner passes away without a solid plan, the Bitcoin it controls is just gone forever. So this paper actually gives this phenomenon a name, generational loss. It's basically this slow, systematic leakage of Bitcoin out of the network every single time it fails to get passed down. And just think about how easy that is to have happen. Complex passwords, lost hardware wallets, or heirs who don't even know what they're supposed to be looking for. It's a huge, huge challenge. And look, this isn't just some small problem that affects a few unlucky people. The paper argues that when you compound this loss over decades and then centuries, it leads to something catastrophic for the entire network, a great liquidity crisis. Okay, so just how bad could this get? Well, the author throws out a pretty conservative estimate, a 30% loss rate every single time wealth is transferred from one generation to the next. To put that in perspective, for every 10 Bitcoin out there, 3 of them are likely to be lost forever with each generational handover. And this is where it gets really crazy, because you have to watch how that loss compounds. Okay, so after one generation, we're down to 70% of the accessible supply. Fine. But after the next transfer, we lose 30% of that 70%, which leaves just 49%. Let that sink in. And only 2 generations, over half of the circulating Bitcoin supply could be permanently locked away. The end game here, the ultimate result, is what the paper calls network petrification. It's a great term. Bitcoin effectively turns to stone. Yeah, it still exists on the ledger, but it can't be moved, it can't be spent, it can't be used to secure the network. It just becomes this museum of digital ghosts. A cool relic, but not a living currency. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. It's the most common argument against this whole idea. But wait, isn't Bitcoin infinitely divisible, right? If the supply shrinks, can't we just trade in smaller and smaller pieces? We can always divide a single Satoshi if we need to. Problem solved? Well, the paper has this fantastic analogy that just completely shuts that down. It says that's like claiming a bar of gold at the bottom of the ocean is still economically useful just because gold as a metal is divisible. It's not. That specific bar is gone. It's the same exact thing with Bitcoin and lost keys. Divisibility is just a unit of measurement. It's not a recovery tool. So yeah, the paper lays out a pretty bleak future, right? But it doesn't just stop there. It doesn't just identify the problem and walk away. It actually proposes a pretty radical solution. And we're not talking about a simple upgrade here. We're talking about an essential survival mechanism for Bitcoin itself. It's called the Continuity Protocol, or as the paper calls it, Bitcoin 2.0. And the core idea is really simple. You accept that this generational loss thing is going to happen, it's inevitable, so you build a system that actively compensates for it, making sure Bitcoin stays liquid and secure for, thousands of years. And when this paper says long-term, it is not kidding around. The whole protocol is designed to keep the network healthy and humming along for over 13,000 years. So the obvious question is, how on earth does it do that? Okay, so the mechanism behind all this is a series of what the author calls 100 cycles of rebirth. And it's basically just a way to systematically and predictably refill the supply of Bitcoin that's going to get lost to time no matter what we do. So here's how one of these cycles would actually work. You fast forward to around the year 2140. That's when the original Bitcoin issuance is supposed to end, right? Well, that's when the first cycle ends. And then something kind of magical happens. The block reward, which should have dropped to 0, instead resets all the way back up to 50 Bitcoin per block, just like the good old days. This kicks off a brand new 132-year schedule, issuing another 21 million coins, all while the surviving Bitcoin from our era just keeps on circulating. And you can just see the powerful effect this has over time. So at the end of our current cycle, around 2140, the accessible supply might have shrunk down to about 14.7 million coins because of all that generational loss. But then, boom, after the first rebirth cycle, a fresh 14.7 million liquid coins get added, and the total is back up to almost 30 million. After the second cycle, it's over 44 million. So this protocol doesn't just plug the leak, it actively creates a growing pool of liquidity to make sure the network can really thrive. And you know what's maybe the most amazing part of all this? This entire massive 13,000-year engine of rebirth is powered by one incredibly simple change to Bitcoin's code. It's something called the modulo operator. In super simple terms, it's like telling the protocol to just reset the clock on the reward schedule every 13-20 years or so and start the whole countdown all over again. So what this proposal really does is it forces the entire Bitcoin community to face a fundamental choice. It lays out two completely different visions for what Bitcoin is and what it should ultimately become. Okay, so on one side, you've got the traditionalist view. For them, the 21 million fixed supply is sacred. It's absolute. And that's true even if it means the network eventually just petrifies and becomes a digital artifact. But on the other side, you've got the evolutionist view. They argue that functional longevity is what really matters, that the main principle should be creating a sustainable currency that can actually thrive for ages. Just think about the year 2140 for a second. Under the original protocol, that's when the security model starts to really get shaky as the mining rewards vanish. But under this continuity protocol, that exact same year marks a moment of rebirth. It kicks off thousands of years of continued secure operation. And that really leaves us with the ultimate question this paper is asking. What should Bitcoin be? Should we preserve it as this perfect, ideologically pure artifact that might be doomed to become unusable? Or should it evolve into a living, breathing monetary system, one that's truly built to last for the long arc of human history? The author really wraps it all up with this powerful thought. Satoshi gave us the beginning. He gave us the spark. But making sure that fire burns for millennia? Well, that might require a whole new design, an idea that gives Bitcoin not just a history, but a real, lasting future.